This is Joe Galloway conducting an oral history interview with Keith Messenger on Thursday at 9 a.m. We are located at the studio of Fox 5 News San Diego in San Diego, California. Before we get to your experiences in Vietnam, could you say and spell your first and last names for the transcriber?
Sure. Keith, Keith, Messenger, Messinger.
Thank you, sir. When and where were you born?
I was born in 1945, October 1945, in Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay. Who were your family members?
Well, my father had been stationed there in the Air Force, and he married my mother there. So that's, I guess, two of my family members.
Yeah.
And I have had one sister, Pam, and she's still alive. She's in Durango, Colorado. And that's the closest family member.
That's it.
Yeah.
You were an Army brat, sort of.
Well, sort of. I think he had been discharged.
He'd already left.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up, go to school? What do you consider your hometown?
I grew up in Cortez, Colorado, which is a real small town in the southwest corner, right where the four states come together.
Right.
Yeah, and that's where I went to junior high and grade school. And then after high school, I went to New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico.
Know it well.
It's a wonderful school.
Yeah. So what's your hometown? Cortez?
Cortez.
Yeah. How did you come to enter the Army?
Well, we're near NMI, New Mexico Military Institute, and it was Vietnam War. So it was a pretty sure thing you were going to go in the Army.
Yeah.
And you're either going to be drafted or volunteer. And I ended up volunteering, enlisting for the Army Security Agency, 4-year enlistment. And that's how I got in.
That's how you got in.
Yeah.
What year did you go in the Army?
1966.
What was your understanding of what was going on in Vietnam at that time? Did the New Mexico Academy teach you the war? Or?
No, they didn't. They just taught, the military department just taught us basics.
Basics.
Yeah, squad drills and
Yeah.
platoons things
So
and all that.
What?
But I saw the Vietnam, of course, like everybody else did, every night on TV.
Yeah.
So, and the whole emphasis was on body counts.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if I would have not gone if we had not had a war going on, but it was like I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So.
The draft was hovering.
Well, yeah.
Where did you do basic training?
I did basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, and I did AIT there, combat engineer. And it was really funny. When I had my initial physical, they said I was non-combat. My eyes were just too bad. I wore glasses and all that. They said I was non-combat. So I got to Fort Leonard Wood, and I decided that instead of Army Security Agency, I wanted to go to OCS. So I dropped ASA, and then they had a physical for OCS, and they said, you're non-combat, but you can go to Transportation Corps, OCS, or whatever. So I did. Fort Eustis, Virginia, did my OCS there, got out, volunteered for Special Forces, went to jump school, got sent the first group in Okinawa, branch transferred from Transportation Corps to infantry. Nobody ever gave me a physical after that, so it's like, wow, okay.
All right.
Here I am.
Here you are. You've gone from the Transportation Corps to Special Forces.
Yeah, non-combat.
What further training did you get?
Well, and that was really a nice thing about SF. We didn't go like most of the guys, just 8 weeks of basic and then you're in Vietnam.
And all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I was in Oki for almost 3 years with an A team, and so we were doing exercises in Taiwan with the Taiwanese Special Forces and our own exercises and stuff. So you just pick up a lot of experience like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you deploy to Vietnam?
In August 1970.
At what rank?
Captain.
Captain. How did you get to Vietnam and where did you land?
Well, in Okinawa, one of our friends came through, a colonel, Clyde Sincere, and he wanted some volunteers to come over there to an outfit called MacSog. And, sounded okay to me. In fact, my team, when I left there, gave me a briefcase that had my name on it and it had VV, Victor Volunteer, because I had volunteered us for any kind of stuff I could volunteer us for. But anyway, so I volunteered for that, got orders to Vietnam with a delay in CONUS, back to the United States for leave. And then I flew out of, where did I fly out of?
Travis?
I flew out of Travis, you're right. I flew out of Travis, did the northern route, Alaska, and then down to Vietnam.
Yeah, landed Tonsillet.
Landed there, yeah, and I'll never forget flying in. We were getting close, and we were looking out. Somebody was looking out the windows and says, "Man, there's a bunch of shit going on out there." And everybody got over in the windows, and you can see red stuff. And I said, "Boy, somebody's getting the hell knocked out of them." And it turned out it was the wing light reflecting in the fog.
Okay, but got all the pucker factor.
Well, all the new guys, you know.
Yeah. So what happened when you landed? Did they?
So when we landed, we went to the repo depot, and of course they wanted to send me off to like 101st or 173rd. Or
But you got orders.
well, my orders were but repo depot was they were bad. That was a bad place. They didn't even have phones for people to use. But I managed to get hold of a phone, and I called 5th Group, and they sent a Jeep and just picked me up. I just left.
Just left.
So I might be AWOL as far as they're concerned. But
Right, I'm sure you are. 5th Group got you and sent you where?
5th Group sent me up to CCN, Command and Control North. That's MACV SOG.
Explain SOG, Studies and Observation
Studies
Group.
and Observations Group. They used to be, originally they were called Special Operations Group.
Special Operations Group, yeah.
But to fool people, like it really did, they changed the name to Studies and Observations Group. And we did
Bunch of archaeologists.
something like that. Well, they did on most missions when we came back want to know what the dirt was. And I was like, what do you mean what the dirt was? It was dirt, you know. But anyway, we did long-range reconnaissance out of country. At that time, it was very classified. We had teams that were made up of Vietnamese. We had teams that were made up of Nungs. They were Vietnamese with Chinese descent. We had some teams that were Chu Hois. They were teams of people that had surrendered and came to work. I didn't want to ever go on one of those teams.
Mm-mm.
And that's
What
basically.
was your preference, Nungs?
I just took whatever they gave me,
Whatever they
except
gave
no Chu Hois. Yeah. So I got
And it was
Vietnamese.
what, 2 Americans, 3 or 4 Indige?
Yeah, if you went, you could carry 3 or 4 Americans if you wanted to. We would have strap hangers come with us to go out on a mission. They wanted to or whatever. And then the number of little people we took with us depended on what the mission was. Sometimes we took more, sometimes we took less, and whatever. So I had about 10 little people, and I took, 7, 8, 9 most of the time. I always tried to end up in an odd number on my team. I'm not sure why. I think that might have been some Vietnamese thing about odd numbers.
Chinese luck.
Ah, okay.
7, 13.
Yeah.
Got to have the right number. Our previous SOG veteran interviewer talked about how many missions that afterward you had to look at and say, man, we were compromised. They were waiting for us. Did you have some of those?
I had one of those. Yeah, we had a security leak somewhere, and I don't know if they ever traced it down. It was down in Saigon, most of us thought. And it was a pretty secure thing. When they gave you a target, they'd pull you into isolation. You weren't talking to anybody anymore, and you had a map, 10 clicks,
10
whatever, by
grids,
every with
yeah.
your target. The little people, you didn't even get maps.
Yeah.
Until just before you went in, you gave them a smaller map.
Yeah.
And so we really tried to have security. We even carried a secure radio that weighed like 40 pounds or something, so they couldn't hear us talking. And but yeah,
Previous interviewer said when that became more common, that you had some flexibility as to where the helicopter inserted you, and that he would just tell the helicopter, find me another LZ in this block, but not these 3 that are on the map.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. What our Cubbies and Cubby riders would go out and survey possible landing zones.
Yeah.
And they'd usually come back with what they thought were okay. Then Intel would look at them and see what reports we had about enemy activity around them or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they'd give that to the 1-0 and say, pick your LZ, but you can change it. And then they had fake insertions
Yeah.
where they used a thing called a Nightingale, which is it's a bunch of firecrackers and
Yeah.
cherry bombs and everything, all encoded in a plastic thing. And the helicopter would set down like it was dropping off troops. They'd ignite the Nightingale, throw it out, then they'd take off. So immediately a firefight would start there,
Yeah.
because you're hoping all the
bad guys.
bad guys go there, and then
Yeah.
they had to put you down over here. But very often when they put us down, after you stayed at the DZ for just a few minutes to think things okay, and then you'd leave the DZ, and very often within 5-10
Drop
minutes,
zone, by the way. for
right,
our-
drop zone, you'd hear signal shots behind you. They were already tracking you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were basically running through the jungle from that point on.
Well, yeah, there was various ways to break the track, but you didn't run. Most of the time you moved so slow, it's hard to explain how slow you would move, so you're not making noise and stuff. We didn't follow trails normally. We moved about halfway up the mountain just through the brush and stuff. And but if they did get behind you and they were tracking you in close, I don't know what everybody else carried, I carried a canteen full of CS powder, and it had wrapped with det cord with the igniter on it.
Yeah.
So you ignite that, throw it behind you, and about 2 minutes later it goes off, and with the explosion it would cover about a football field with CS powder, and that would break the dogs.
Oh, that'd break the dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Did all the other guys carry those?
I don't know. I'm sure that wasn't an original idea, so I'm sure somebody carried it.
Yeah. How often were you going out on missions, and how long did a mission last, if there was an average?
Well, I think most teams did probably 2 missions a month, or more. I'm not sure the averages, the statistics there. And most teams would stay out, well, supposedly until their mission's over. And it could be something you could do in 4 days or 5 days. But a lot of teams got shot out. And especially by the time I was over there, a lot of teams were getting shot out. But you'd get missions like bring back a 55-gallon oil drum empty. And it was RPM Dello, by the way. And so that would take, just as long as it took to do it without getting detected.
Did you ever get to do one of those missions where they put the delayed explosive in the half-filled oil drums they were floating down the rivers?
No, I didn't. Sounds like a good idea, though.
Great idea. made a terrific boom, because they would pull the avgas or whatever it was, and put it in a dump with a whole lot of other barrels, and then 2 days later, kaboom.
That's cool.
Describe for me, What were your living conditions like when you were back in CCN?
Well, we had a hooch, team hooch, and the Americans, we stayed just there. We had the 1-0, the 1-1, and the 1-2 that stayed there. And behind us in the same hooch, but a different entrance, was another team. And it was just wood.
Yeah.
And, you know, rats had come in and stuff. And then the Vietnamese teams, or the other teams, lived in their own little hooches, you know, where they could cook their meals or whatever they wanted to do.
But the whole compound was highly secure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now that compound was overrun by the bad guys.
Early on, I forget what year, but yes, it was overrun. They came up from the beach, and they killed
a lot of guys.
Killed a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah.
None of that happened while you were there.
No, not, thank goodness. We were close, though, to the recon club where the bar was and everything. So that was good to have your hooch fairly close to there.
You could crawl back to your bunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Describe your friendships with and your impressions of your team members, the guys you worked with on a daily basis.
Well, I don't think I had any friendships per se, but I know that I trusted them, especially their knowledge and their sense of what was around them. So when my 0-1, I was a 1-0.
You were a 1-0. What's that mean? You were
that means a team leader.
And your 0-1
was the Vietnamese team leader.
Okay.
So when he came up and said, "Die we go," then we went. Yeah.
So you had a level of high trust in the Vietnamese you worked with.
They've been doing it for years, and they were doing it after I left.
Yeah.
For a while. So they were professionals, and they were, you know, I paid them, so they had loyalty to you in a way. We got their payday and paid them when they went home to their families and that kind of stuff.
Describe for me the best mission that you had in a year's time.
The best mission? Well, I guess it would be, we were out, and you know, we gathered strategic intelligence. So what mattered was like their uniforms. Where did the cotton come from? Come from Egyptian cotton. So they know where to supposedly take care of that in the next war. So it was a little hard doing strategic type intelligence, but we were on one mission to just check out a grid and just going through we got in with no problems going through the jungle. I was sitting there, we were sitting there talking very quietly, taking a little break, and I was sitting there on a stump or something with my feet on something, and I had a 1-2 along with me, James Butler, and he says, "Keith, your feet are on a 500-pound bomb." So I removed my feet, and we got away from there. It was so old, you know, it's all covered with jungle crap and all that. Who knew? But anyway, we continued the mission, and we got down towards a fork in the river somewhere in there. This was in Laos. And we went in. We found ourselves in a base camp that they had set up for. They set up camp so a Vietnamese company or whatever, NVA, could march a day and have a camp all ready for them. Yeah. March a day and have a camp all ready for them.
Right.
So
all the way down the Ho Chi Minh
all the way down.
Trail.
Yeah. And a lot of people, you know, think of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, it's just a little trail, but it was a gravel highway with telephone lines, pipelines.
POL pipelines.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big deal. But anyway, we entered this area that was all prepared, but nobody was there yet. So we started taking photos and finding out what kind of dirt it was, and marking the location for intelligence and all that. And then we heard the company, the North Vietnamese, coming in. So we were backed up against the river. So we moved on down towards the river, and I called for, and this was my good mission, I called for an extraction. And the way you call for extractions, a lot of times you use an emergency radio. So I think it was an IRC-10 or something. And you come up on guard because anybody flying over monitored guard.
Yeah.
And we had two planes that orbited over Laos. In the daytime, we had, the nighttime we had Moonbeam. And the daytime was, and I'll remember that in just a minute. But anyway, I came up on Hillsborough. It was Hillsborough. I came up on guard and said, Hillsborough, this is deck chair, and we have a problem. So when I came up on guard and I turned the radio on, another radio back up there with the Vietnamese went off. So they had a
guard radio.
Yeah. So they knew we were close. So they started, searching through the brush and trying to find us and everything. And so we finally, what Hillsborough did then is radio all the assets, any jets, any spades, whatever they are, from Thailand, any kind of assets, everything went to us. We had a prairie fire situation.
Yep.
And the helicopters lifted off, coming to get us. And so they got close enough that the planes were firing around us. And then the helicopters came in and we went out on ladders. They dropped these metal ladders out the side, and there's rungs held together with cable. And you climb up on the ladder as far as you can go, except the 10, he's the last one up. You climb up on the ladder as far as you go, and then you snap in, because you can't hold on. You would drop in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And then they pull you out. And that's what happened. They pulled us out. Going through the clouds, the clouds are made of moisture.
Yes,
so they beat on you, And so we landed at Khe Sanh, which was in the old days quite a place, but it was totally empty now.
Yeah.
We landed on the runway at Khe Sanh so we could get off the ladders and get back into the choppers.
And Khe Sanh was not occupied at that point.
No. And we did at that point have radio relay site Hickory that looked down on Khe Sanh, which was was manned by our guys.
Yeah.
And that Hickory fell on June 2nd, 1971.
Were they shooting at you when you went out on the ladder?
They were.
They were close.
Yeah. My team never had any, well, I take it back. I was going to say my team never had anybody wounded or killed. But when I started out with RT Virginia, I was the 1-1. And on the first mission I went out, we did have a guy wounded. Mm. Yeah, so I'm on my first mission where we stayed at night. We RON'd, remained overnight in a circle. We can touch each other. And during the night, the Vietnamese came up close to us. So first light, they opened fire. And next to me is a black guy named Bill something. He had orange hair. Mm-hmm. But he was on the ground. They shot him through here, came out here, and he goes, I'm dead. And so my eyes were like this. Since my first mission, right? Oh my God. Anyway, he wasn't dead. He turned out to be okay. And we got out of there. So, and I don't think we came out under fire into that. We actually managed to break contact and continue on a while.
Get out?
Yeah.
Did you have to carry that guy?
No, he was bandaged him up and he was mobile.
He walked.
Yeah.
That was your best mission. Tell me about your worst mission.
Oh boy. The worst mission was when I got left behind.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. We were up in Quang Tri, one of our launch sites. We launched out of Phu or NKP in Thailand.
Nakhon Phanom.
Phanom, which is a totally secret thing over there. I got thrown out of Thailand once, but anyway, that's a different story. So we were in Quang Tri, and the former 10 on RT Virginia, Teeter, his name was Teeter, was flying covied in, which is what I ended up doing, backseat in the covey.
Backseat in a spotter plane.
Yeah, yeah.
L-10 or
And he was looking at, I was in an OV-10, so that was,
OV-10.
yeah, that was a great plane. Some of them were in O2As, that's a push me, pull me.
Yeah.
And I flew some in those too. I didn't really like those, but anyway, Roger Teeter and Wilson, an Air Force guy named Wilson, crashed into a mountain. They were out looking for an area to put us in, and they crashed. And so they sent out a bright light team. That's a team they send in to rescue teams or whatever. Yeah. And they brought them out. And
were they dead or alive?
They're dead.
Dead.
Those planes burn real fast, you know. And Roger's seat had collapsed, so his body was there, but all his appendages were gone. So I could identify him. They call him Buffalo. But anyway, the Vietnamese had also been to the site or went to the site afterwards. So when we went in a couple of days later, this was Christmas 1970. When we went in a couple of days later, they knew we were coming. See, we had made a mistake. We should have canceled that whole damn mission. But headquarters, you know.
It was already planned. So
Headquarters, yeah. Let's see what happens. Put them in, see what happens. So we come in on the choppers, and we jump out of the choppers. The choppers start to take off. They open with 51 caliber machine guns. They put them in a triangle position.
Yeah.
They opened up on the choppers. The choppers flew away. Here we are on the ground, and they're shooting at us. And so we didn't even leave the DZ. We stayed right on the DZ, or the LZ. Yeah, get them confused. Airborne, get them confused. The choppers, the gunships lay down the perimeter and all that stuff. Love the Apache. And the Hueys came back in, the Slicks came back in, and everybody jumped into them, and we had a real small team on that mission. Everybody jumped into one. So he was like this, with a skid down, and the other skid over this side was up in the air. So I ran around. I was going to get on that side because everybody was getting in this side. But everybody got in, and then he took off.
And you're still on the ground.
And I'm still on the ground. So
this is a beginning of a bad day.
I ejected my magazine, put a fresh one in, said, oh, shit. And I wasn't there very long. It seems like there were a couple hours, but I was only there a couple of minutes. They had done a head count real quick.
And realized
Daiwi was on the ground.
Daiwi was still back there.
At the same place. So, yeah, so they came and got me. That was good.
Were the machine guns still shooting?
They were, and I can tell you the extreme luck I had with my team. We had tracers one time going through the compartment where the guys were.
Yeah.
Going in one door and out another door.
That's very impressive.
We had one where the door gunner, his gun jammed. He picked up his he had an M14, I think. We had car 15s. So it had a stock on it. Yeah. He picked up that to start shooting, and the stock got shot right where it was crossing his body. So he survived. And then we had
50 cal?
No, it wasn't a 50 cal. That would have gone through. Yeah. And so and we had another one when we got in the ground. The pilot, and they looked at a little bubble.
Yeah.
And had a shot had come through that bubble, right up by the pilot. So, but other than that, we were pretty damn lucky.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
If that's your worst mission.
Yeah.
Not bad. You survived it.
I survived it. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, did you ever have any contact with our allies, the Aussies, the Koreans, the Thais, the Filipinos,
No.
the New Zealand? None of that.
None of that, other than when I went on R&R.
Totally focused on what you were doing.
But I'm sure there were probably some of their special op troops, maybe in SOG, that were, I know we had SEALs.
Yeah.
We never saw them either.
Yeah.
And so they could have been involved
in it. They
in
were operating with Nungs up in that area too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you were operating with Vietnamese mercenaries.
Yes,
Uh, your impression of those people?
they were real sharp. Yeah, they're really loyal to Vietnam. You, you can call them a mercenary, but they weren't. They weren't a mercenary in the sense of the word. They were fighting for their side. The only difference is they were getting paid cash. I don't know what the other guys got paid, but they were very sharp. They're very knowledgeable. They'd been doing the job for a long time, and I felt kind of bad for them in a way,
Yeah.
especially when Vietnam fell.
Yeah.
That was bad.
I suspect.
Yeah.
How much contact did you have with your family back home, or did you?
I did. That was interesting. That was really different how it compared to Iraq versus Vietnam. But yeah, so there's no email. All you had is regular mail.
And Mars, if you wanted.
And Mars, if you were lucky. And I got on Mars once, and I got a telephone contact once to the Red Cross, and was able to talk very briefly. And but Mars, yeah, you had to say over. And
teach
of course,
your mom how to say
yeah,
over.
yeah. On the
now.
civilian end, But that was fun. I was actually talking to my wife, and she was an Air Force brat, so she knew a little
She
bit.
knew
yeah.
a bit about it.
Yeah.
Did you have kids at that time?
I did. Yeah, I had a son and a daughter. Our son was born on Okinawa in first group, so I was one of the few 1-0s with kids. Most of the guys were smarter than that.
And of course, you couldn't tell them what you were doing.
Oh no, you couldn't. So you just tell them we're driving trucks around.
Yeah, having fun.
Yeah.
How much news did you have access to about the war you're fighting in, about the war that's going on at home?
None.
None. You didn't
Unless your
read
wife sends you clippings.
Stars and Stripes.
Stars and Stripes occasionally. I mean, on Oki we got Stars and Stripes all the time, but
All the time.
Vietnam it was
Catch
a
as
little
catch can.
yeah.
You knew, of course, that back home things are in a turmoil. There's social and racial tensions and anti-war demonstrations.
Yeah, because that had been going on
for a long time.
for a long time. When I was on Oki, it was going on. It was going on probably when I enlisted in the military.
Did it bother you?
Oh, it bothered me a bit. The only thing that bothered me was I think most of the guys were there so they could get a piece of tail from some broad. I think they were pretending to be cowards, maybe. I don't know. But when they burned their draft cards, when they went to Canada, that always pissed me off. Yeah.
How long did you stay on that tour? A year?
13 months, I think.
13 months.
Yep.
So you were leaving in early 71.
September. Yeah.
September 71. So
Yeah.
you were there when they were doing Lamson 719.
I was.
I did that operation.
We had a big sign up on the border there when they crossed into, was it Cambodia or Laos?
They were going into Laos.
Laos, yeah. We had a big sign, "Welcome to Green Beret Country." they never showed that on any news.
I
or anything.
didn't think
I was
saw
disappointed.
That, and I saw a lot.
And we had told them constantly there are tanks over there, and they would constantly say, "What you're seeing elephants?" I said, "Listen, there's a big difference between a tank and an elephant. We're not seeing elephants." And when they went to Cambodia, they ran up against some tanks.
Yeah. Well, we sent 40,000 ARVN over there, and they had 60,000 North Vietnamese regulars waiting for them.
Yeah, I can believe it.
It was a debacle.
Yeah,
They dedicated a Huey to the press. We raised a lot of hell. And so we'd flip a coin every night in Quang Tri and see which lucky 5 got the helicopter the next day, and we'd fly up to near Techipone and sit down on some godforsaken hilltop and watch the ARVNs running for their lives.
yeah.
Scary stuff.
It's so sad that
And I saw what you were talking about, that highway with the POL pipelines and electrical lines and everything going there.
Yeah. In fact, some of the missions I never got one. Tapped were the tap phone lines and listen in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so sad they don't listen to your intelligence. But at that time, Creighton Abrams was the general,
Yeah.
and he did not like SF.
Yeah.
I think that's one reason. Westmoreland liked us, that was no problem. But Creighton Abrams did not like any
He was
special guys.
Dead against Green Berets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about going home.
Going home is great. Yeah, we landed, we left Cameron Bay
Yeah.
and
Commercial flight.
commercial flight.
Hot and cold running booze.
Yeah, a lot of that. And we landed at SeaTac in Seattle.
Yeah.
And the pilot let a pilot from Vietnam come up and land the jet. We all thought it was great.
Yeah. Did he do a good job?
He did. He did a great job. Yeah. Of course he did a great job.
Were you in civvies or uniform?
I was still in uniform. Yeah. I wasn't out of the Army.
Right.
A lot of the guys, when they hit the ground, they were basically discharged.
Right.
But I had orders to Fort Bragg, back to Fort Bragg. So I was still.
You had to go over to the airport then and catch another plane.
I came
Did you run
down
into
to-
any of the anti-war folks?
No, I didn't. I didn't. Even when I came down to San Francisco, I didn't run into any of them. So I was lucky. I had a fellow captain on Okinawa that ran into him when he came home to the States on leave, and he had broken both his arms down in the Philippines. He was in the back of a deuce and a half, and it pulled off, and he fell off. You know, he reached out, broke both his arms, so he's in cast. And he came home on leave, and they were at the airport, you know, and bothered him and said baby killer and all that, you know, the usual stuff. And one of them reached up and grabbed his beret. Well,
That you don't do.
that's a big mistake. So Mike hit one of them right under the nose with that cast, and he gets his beret. He looks around, and there's a Navy guy coming up with his duffel bag. Said, "I got the cunt. I got the cunt." He throws his duffel bag on the woman. She falls down, and somebody else is slapping somebody around. And right across the street, there's two San Francisco cops, and they're just watching. I thought that was great.
Oh man. You were staying in the Army. You were not going out there and having the experience that your average
Yeah.
D did.
Yeah, I never got spit on or anything like that, which is good because I would have been in jail for murder.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went back to Fort Bragg and
Back to
had an
Mother
A
Army.
team, and you know, continued on the mission for a while.
How had America changed in that year that you were in Vietnam?
You know, I didn't really notice a lot of change because I left from an Army base and I came back to an Army base. Yeah, so I was kind of shielded. But after I retired after I left the service and we moved to Santa Barbara, I ran into all these people who were very proud how they stopped the war in Vietnam because they burnt the Bank of America down or something. They thought like everybody in the world knew that they burned the Bank of America down. And I'd tell them that, you know, most people don't even know you burned the Bank of America down, but they, you know, that's what they thought.
How much contact have you had with people you knew in SOG back then?
I've had quite a bit through Facebook, and we also have a veterans organization, Special Operations Association, and we meet. I don't remember
Las
when we
Vegas
started, but we
every
meet
year.
we meet in Las Vegas every year. Yeah, we started it I think in late '70s, maybe early '80s. But so you see a lot of guys, and it's great. It's great. There's a open bar, and you just sit there around tables telling war stories and bullshit. And
Lies.
every year you hear the same stories, but they just
They
got
get
a
better.
little better.
They get better.
So that was fun.
Did your Vietnam experience change you or affect the way you lived your life?
I'm sure it did. I think it contributed to nervousness and things like that. But as a whole, for me, like I said, I was expecting to go, I was trained to go. You go and do your job, you come home,
Do another job.
do another job. So it was, I really felt sorry for the younger guys. Yeah, and SOG, we had some advantages other guys didn't have when we did a mission, a good mission, and we stayed on the ground for 5 days or whatever. We'd come back and have 5 days off, and you could get on you go to Thailand, you could go to Taiwan, Saigon, and spend 5 days just relaxing.
Yeah.
So.
And they'd fly you wherever you wanted to go.
Yeah, yeah. We flew in. Tactically, when we flew into Thailand, we flew in a black C-130 Blackbird, and it was crewed by Chinese civilians. So.
We don't want to know all this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we weren't supposed to have combat troops in Thailand,
Right.
but we had troops actually launching out of there. So we had a real classified compound in Thailand. They'd bring you in on the Blackbird. They'd come up in a van. You'd all get into the van, closed sides, right? No windows, and they'd go to the compound. They'd pull in the compound. Then they'd let you out.
Mm.
Yeah.
You're a career military man. What lessons do you think the U.S. Army learned from Vietnam?
Not to trust politicians. Because the Army won the war. Tet, we set them way back, but most people think we lost Tet. And we could have won the war, but we had the politicians took over. And just like most wars, they didn't live up to their promises to the Vietnamese. They sold them out. Henry Kissinger's an asshole. We left prisoners behind, known prisoners behind, a lot of SF guys. And, they just sold them out because they wanted to establish trade with Vietnam. Money. That's the answer to the whole thing. We sold the brew out, when we abandoned them in Laos.
The Montagnards.
The Montagnards, yeah. And we continue to abandon people.
Did your time in Vietnam affect the way you think about veterans coming home from combat today?
Oh, well, yes. I don't know if it really affected it, but I always love veterans coming home. And I'm always so envious of them. They're coming home, and I know what
they're
that.
Getting a nice welcome.
Yeah, oh yeah, they are getting a nice welcome.
America's learned a lesson or two.
We still have some idiots out there protesting, but yeah, they're getting some nice welcome homes. That's wonderful. They had some tough conditions they're coming home from. I think the war in Iraq, in a lot of ways, is more dangerous than Vietnam.
So do I.
Yeah, the Vietnam, if somebody had a rifle or whatever, they were your enemy. But in Iraq, everybody has a damn rifle.
Everybody has an AK.
Yeah, and they celebrate a wedding, they get in the back of a truck, drive down the street, shooting their guns in the air. Well, in Vietnam, if they did that, would have wasted them.
You'd have killed them all, yeah.
So, and IEDs, we didn't have IEDs in Vietnam. We had booby traps and stuff.
I spent one New Year's Eve in Baghdad. And the next day they were reporting that 12 people had been killed by bullets that were shot in the air and fell straight down and hit somebody in the head.
Well, I'm surprised that's not Oakland. They still do it.
What do you think the Vietnam War meant to you and your generation?
Well, I think the Vietnam War to me gave me a sense of fulfillment of duty and a fulfillment of honor. We were committed, just like Iraq. We were committed, right or wrong, we're committed. You go in there and do the best damn job you can do. And yeah, Vietnam was tough.
It was tough.
It was
tough.
I have to tell you though, my last few months in Vietnam, I spent as a covey rider.
Tell me about that.
So I'm in the back of an OB-10, and they gear you up with an Air Force survival vest and a little .38 pistol. I think it was a .38. I don't know, revolver. And then you take off that OB-10 and you go out and fly over the AO, and every now and then you get shot at. Most of the time you're just out there doing nothing until somebody declares prairie fire, and then you go in for close air support. The OV-10 was great for that. It had miniguns. The O2A was terrible for that. It carried rockets that push me, pull me, but his gun sight was a grease mark on the windshield that it put in there, I guess from experience. The OV-10 was a little different than that.
It had some fangs.
Yeah, it had some fangs. And I was there, I was covey for when radio relay Hickory site fell, or the radio relay site Hickory fell.
Overrun?
They were overrun, yeah. And John Valersky was left behind. He was taken prisoner and later awarded the Medal of Honor. He's no longer with us.
He didn't survive?
He came home, yeah, he
did
survived,
come home.
yeah. He survived and actually stayed in the military for a while. But he died recently in the last couple of years. Yeah, that was a tough day. That was like watching a war movie. You're up here in an OV-10, you're controlling air assets, or the front seat's controlling the air assets. I'm controlling the Army assets, the helicopters, the slicks. And on the ground you can see incoming going, boom, boom. It's like watching a movie. Tracers coming up. It was surreal. It was really surreal. And I'll tell you a funny story.
There were guys E&Eing out of there.
Yeah, little people all E. We got all the Americans out except for
the one guy.
One John. Yeah, and I had to say, John, I had to tell him there was a Spectre on the way. They can fly over at night and everything. And I said, we just can't get you out, John. And he said, they're right outside the door. And so I think I was the last one to talk to him. But that was, that was a bad day. Yeah.
So he only spent a couple of years in Hilton.
Yeah.
How do you think the Vietnam War is remembered in our society today?
Depends on if you're a civilian or a military person. I think the civilians, anybody younger than 40 doesn't even remember the Vietnam War.
Yeah, they don't have any memory at all.
And I don't even know if it's in the history books. And the civilians, most of them I've talked to, they're glad they didn't go. And I'm glad for them, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I've never had one say, I went to Canada, because they'd not have punched him. But I would just say, they always say, I'm fortunate I didn't have to go. And so I respect for them too.
I had a guy once come up to me at the wall and ask if I didn't think it was time to build a memorial to the draft dodgers.
That day's coming. We're tearing down all the statues. They just put up a statue of Freddie Gray, that black guy that got shot by the cop in Baltimore. They put up a statue. So that day might be coming, and that wall is sad, isn't it? You go there, and this by year, so I can go there and I can trace all the names of all the guys.
They're all there.
When I left, when I was at CCN, we lost about 20 Americans in the year I was there, and that was bad. Yeah.
Well, I can go to panel 3 East, and there are 305 names I know on that one panel.
Yeah, one name I had my wife trace for me. She went back there before. Stroline, Madison Stroline. I was flying Covey. I always consider this a mistake, but everybody tells me, wasn't. But anyway, we were flying Covey, and the Halo team had dropped in. We used Halo sometimes. Not very good idea, but Billy Waugh, J.D. Bath, and Stroline, Madison Stroline dropped in, and they were in trouble as soon as they dropped in with the trees and stuff. They were hung up in the trees, get out and whatever. So I was flying, got in a helicopter to get Billy Waugh, that's a guy to interview, and J.D. Bath. He was my sergeant major in Recon Company, Billy Waugh. I got them out, but I couldn't find Madison. We were trying to figure out where he is in the radio, whatever. So we had a team standing by to go get him.
You were talking to him.
I was talking to him. Yeah, he was alive. He was hung up in the trees. So I asked him, I said, well, pop smoke. He popped smoke, and I said, "I see red smoke." And he said, "Yep." So I knew that was him. You couldn't say pop red smoke because then red smoke would go up all over.
All over the place.
But I knew that was him, so I put a team in, and he wasn't there. What had happened is the red smoke had drifted down the heavy canopy and then come up about 500 yards or whatever away from him. And so,
Team went in at the wrong location.
wrong location, couldn't find him, couldn't get to him. They came out, night came, next morning he was gone.
So he was hanging up in his chute,
Yeah.
up in a tree.
So his weapon was there, empty, and they had just taken him.
Yeah.
So he's I think he's not. He's listened KIA because he's on the wall. Yeah. So I always considered that my big mistake.
Doesn't sound like it was yours.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Are there lessons from Vietnam that we ought to be remembering today?
Well, I think we should rely less on strategic intelligence and rely more on tactical intelligence, which we probably do now. I don't know what the Army does today. They seem to be doing a fairly good job. So Vietnam, we learned to deploy, we learned not to deploy units and then send replacements. We learned, now we deploy entire units as a unit, right?
Right,
Bring them home, take them over, because being the FNG in one of those units and getting over there, they pick you up at the repo depot, they take you over to a helicopter, they fly you out in the jungle,
Drop you in.
and you're in the war.
You're in the war, but nobody knows.
Nobody knows you, you know.
Don't care about you.
You're an FNG, you're dangerous to even be around.
Yeah.
So I think that was the most important lesson we learned.
You visited the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in
Yes.
D.C.? What do you think when you go there?
It's very emotional. Yeah, it's very moving. See all those guys, you know.
58,215.
Yeah.
You've obviously heard of the Vietnam War 50th anniversary commemoration because you're part of it.
Yes, I am part of it. And my wife belongs to the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Oh, they're big
And they're doing a
supporters.
big thing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're big supporters. What
Yeah.
do you think of that?
I think it's great.
About time?
Well, I think it's probably, if it had been too early, it wouldn't have been as effective as it is now. Now a lot of people are curious about Vietnam because they really don't know about it, and it's good to remind them all and give them a chance to hear about it.
When my dad and all his brothers and my mother's brothers came back from World War II, they all had a little lapel pin, an eagle with a gold circle around it. They called it the
Ruptured duck.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah, my dad had one. That's when they got discharged to get the ruptured duck.
A discharge pin.
Yeah.
If you didn't have one of those on your lapel pin in 1946, you couldn't get elected to dog catcher. Well, we thought we needed to create a ruptured duck for the Vietnam veterans.
Oh,
And
cool.
I happen to have one here that I'm going to pin on you.
All right.
It won't be blood wings, but
Oh, thank God. And it's not a ruptured duck.
it's a ruptured eagle.
I never saw a ruptured duck. I actually had an operation in first group for a rupture in the Army hospital, but I
Yeah.
never saw a ruptured duck.
On the back, it says, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you." And so it should. And I'm going to stick it in you.
Careful.
Yeah. All right. You are pinned.
All right, thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Captain.